Hi vinyl community, this is Graham, and I'm going to do a video today which has been inspired by a channel called Rob, and by Rob Ison. That's Rob I-S-O-N. He has an excellent channel covering a lot of vinyl stuff, sort of folk rock a lot of the time. It's really interesting, very in-depth. But he did something a bit different, which was looking at music books that he'd enjoyed reading. And so I thought I'd kind of jump on that. And they're going to be a bit of a mixture. There's some biographies, autobiographies, and some sort of reference books that I really enjoy as well. So I'll just kick on with it. So first of all is Neil Peart, the drummer from Rush, and this is Ghost Rider. Neil Peart died in 2020, and this book is basically a healing journey, a healing road as he calls it. He's a big motor cyclist, has a large BMW, and unfortunately a very tragic year. I think it was in the early 90s when he lost his daughter and then his wife very quickly afterwards, and basically did the only thing he thought he could do, which was just really go on a long open-ended motorcycle ride in northern Canada, and I think up through Alaska as well. And it's a really good read, obviously very raw, but very interesting insight into him and his kind of his mind really at the time, and then coming back to Rush and coming back to drums. He didn't play drums for a long period of time. So really good book, recommended. Ghost Rider. He's done quite a few other books. He's an extremely erudite writer. Highly recommended. Next we have Steve Howe, guitarist from Yes, All My Yesterdays. This is quite a newish book, came out I think late 2019. Long awaited. Steve Howe hadn't written an autobiography, which, bear in mind, he's had a career of over 50 years, pretty much in the limelight, obviously originally with Yes, had sort of superstardom very quickly with Asia as well, GTR with Steve Hackett, and then kind of back to Yes. Very interesting guy, and what I like about this is he talks quite a lot about how it's fairly grueling being on long tours, as people can probably guess. But I think a lot of us had a very romantic view of kind of rock stardom being on the road. And although Howe is ever grateful to his audience and of course puts in stellar performances and is very professional, he also talks about how hard it is being on the road, staying in hotels, concert venues, sound checks, traveling, flying. You can imagine it gets pretty draining, and particularly as you get a bit older, it's very hard work. So really good book, very good insight. That's Steve Howe, All My Yesterdays. Highly recommended. Little bit of a different genre, jazz fusion, jazz rock. Joe Zabanel, the keyboard player from Weather Report, and also of course Miles Davis. This is In a Silent Way, a portrait of Joe Zabanel by Brian Glasser. Just a great book by really a genius, and kind of unusual because of course he came from Austria originally, and one of the things is that influenced his music a lot. He wasn't from a kind of wealthy background. He came from Austria, played with Cannonball Adderley and then Miles Davis, wrote for them, and you can hear the kind of influence of his kind of European background in his playing, in his kind of music, particularly with Weather Report. Very sort of different sounding band from the other fusion bands. Really interesting hearing about his relationship with Jaco Pastorius, favourite musician of mine. Very much a sort of father-son dynamic going on. Zabanel was about twice the age of Jaco when he joined Weather Report. And Jaco, of course, could go toe-to-toe with Zabanel in terms of sort of virtuosity. And at times that just produced absolute sparks. And the two of them kind of almost like two boxers in a ring, two cobras, as somebody said. But really interesting. And then his latter solo career, very, very interesting guy, very bright, and a great portrayal of him, Joe Zabanel. Okay, sort of psychedelia, late 60s, early 70s, and of course sort of proto-progressive rock. The Nice, which was the band that Keith Emerson formed before Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and in fact was formed to back P.P. Arnold, the soul singer. She kind of had a backing band, and that band was The Nice, who then went out by themselves and of course did very well. Known for the rendition of America by Leonard Bernstein. This is a really good book by an excellent author that I know personally, Martin Hansen. He's written quite a lot of stuff about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, liner notes, that sort of thing for CDs and vinyl releases. So it's called Hang On To A Dream, which is a nice track. Really good book, just picks up very well the kind of psychedelic ambience of the late 60s going into the 70s, and really how The Nice kind of melded that together. So some psychedelia with kind of classical, which would be very typical of progressive rock. Great story. Also a little bit poignant in that so many of these books, these kind of biographies, there's often kind of one of the musicians that kind of strikes off alone and goes to bigger things. But in some ways, I'm not saying Emerson regretted it for 1 minute, but you have a sense of band of brothers with The Nice, all good fun, touring's great fun. Obviously they were a lot younger, and then a bit more money comes in, and sometimes they lose a little bit of that kind of creativity, that fun element, as things become a little bit more serious and heavyweight. And I think that may have happened with Keith Emerson. A lot of these people are often very affectionate towards their original bands. Greg Lake with King Crimson as well, of course. But a really good book, Hang On To A Dream, Martin Hansen. Jaco Pastorius, The Extraordinary and Tragic Life of Jaco Pastorius, the world's greatest bass player, which of course was true, and was Jaco's rather grandiose quote about himself, but as he said, if you can back it up. Bill Milkowski, who's an excellent writer, and knew Jaco. This is a terrific book, just because the arc of Jaco's life was extraordinary. True genius, great writer, not just bass player, but wonderful sort of writer. His solo albums have really risen in stock in the last 20 years or so, really. Of course, tragically died in 1987 at the young age of 35. This is just a really good book, and doesn't shy away from covering some of the difficult periods Jaco had towards the end of his life, problems with mental illness and addictions, and how such a titanic talent could get pulled down very, very quickly because of some of these addictions, but also the combination of mental health issues with addictions. Great book, really recommended. I found this utterly compelling. It made me revisit a lot of the recordings and discover a lot of other stuff, because he did a lot of projects with other people as a sideman. Very well known, of course, for Weather Report, but he also he's got some stellar work with Joni Mitchell. So great book, Jaco Pastorius. This is a great series. This is the On Track series. This is Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Every album, every song. Mike Good, really, really good book. Covers every album and every track. And I really like the insight. Mike is an excellent writer. I think it's his first book, certainly on music. So he's a kind of musicologist style. These books go through in huge detail the tracks, where they were recorded, any change in instrumentation, that sort of stuff. Just a very, very good series. I've got Yes and Genesis in this series as well. Highly, highly recommended. There's the Yes one by Stephen Lamb. I won't say too much about this. Excellent series. Highly recommend it for people that are looking for some great detail on tracks and track listings on bands. Also Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This is a huge tome by Ed McCann. It's called The Endless Enigma. This is a musical biography of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Goes into massive detail about the band, the tracks, the albums. But also what I like about Ed McCann is he looks at sort of missed opportunities. So with a band like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who came to a sort of crashing halt in the late 70s, kind of punk had taken over. They tried to do a commercial album at the end of the late 70s, 1978, called Love Beach, which didn't do well, and sort of alienated a lot of progressive rock fans. And Ed actually, he doesn't sort of varnish the truth really, what they were trying to achieve, what the record company, of course, was pushing at them, and how it can kind of unravel quite quickly. A band that would pretty much have put out stuff that would have been hugely loved, and then is suddenly in a kind of quite a hostile environment towards them, and how they cope with it or don't cope. So great book, Endless Enigma, Ed McCann, long read, but absolute favourite. I mentioned some reference books. This is one of my absolute favourites on progressive rock. It's the Strawberry Bricks Guide to Progressive Rock. This is a revised and expanded edition by Charles Snyder. I love this book. One of the things about it is it's just allowed me to discover so much music. It's not just all the obvious bands. So for instance, he'll go off to things like Italian progressive rock, sort of European, quite obscure releases, Canadian, American, all sorts of kind of different avenues that have fed into the major river of progressive rock. It's a terrific book, really well researched. So you've got a kind of write-up of each album that he recommends. And again, he's kind of critical. So sometimes if a band had a good album, but then just sort of followed it up with something that was disappointing, he'll kind of say that. So excellent book, reference guide, the Strawberry Bricks Guide to Progressive Rock. I know there's another edition has come out since this, but it's an absolute Bible for progressive rock fans. Okay, this is probably my favourite musical autobiography. It's Bill Bruford, drummer with Yes, King Crimson, UK, played with Genesis and Gone, all sorts of people. He's such an interesting speaker. If people have heard him, he's very erudite, arch, got a wicked sort of dry sense of humour, and it's a very unvarnished account of his life with Yes, King Crimson and all the rest of the music. And again, he doesn't shy away from sort of calling it how it is. There's one particular story I remember. He talks about touring in somewhere like, I think it might even be somewhere like Slovakia or Lithuania, with Earthworks, his kind of jazz band, and it's a very cottage industry by this stage. This is kind of 2000s. He does everything himself, books the hotel, arranges the musicians, the various kind of checks that need to be done for a tour of Europe. And he talks about plugging in his, what was then electronic drum kit, hybrid drum kit, Simmons kit, with his acoustic kit, and realizing that every now and again it would cut out on stage. And this was because the bar in the venue that they were playing had a huge sort of fridge to keep chilled drinks. And every time the guy opened the fridge door, it sort of used up more electricity, and therefore the Simmons kit was cutting out. And it's just great stories like that. So Bill Bruford, the autobiography, highly recommended. This came out 2010. He's a great writer. Just two more to go. Crash. This is a book by David Frangione, who owns Modern Drummer magazine, and is basically a pictorial history of just some of the most amazing drum kits. So for somebody like me, it's just fantastic. It's a complete sort of coffee table indulgence. Probably this being the favourite, Carl Palmer's 2.5 ton stainless steel drum kit, But we've also got things like Neil Peart's kit here. There's a Ringo kit in there, all sorts of gigantic, enormous drum kits, a lot of them from the 70s, of course. And they're photographed beautifully with a write-up about the history of the kit and often where they are now as well. So if you're into your drums and your big drum kits, this is just a great book. David Frangione has really done a lot of research for this and owns a lot of the kits as well, has them lovingly restored, and even has I think some sort of museum which has obviously not been available or open because of COVID, but it'd be great to visit at some stage. I intend to visit, certainly see Carl Palmer's drum kit. Okay, last up, and I have huge affection for this. This is the Illustrated New Musical Express Encyclopedia of Rock by Nick Logan and Bob Woofington. I think for a lot of people, if you go back to the sort of 70s, for me, the late 70s, trying to get information on bands was incredibly difficult. And this was just a Bible, as it had all the releases and kind of pointed you in different directions to follow. So it was just terrific. You could look up a lot of bands. There's a huge amount of detail in the pages. And it's just a great reference guide. I got this actually because I lost my original copy, or it got left behind. And in fact, I picked this up for £2 on eBay, just really to reminisce. And it was very much a trip down memory lane, but good writing and just really good, solid reference guide. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed that. Skipping through some books and things that I've just really enjoyed reading over the years. Okay, hope everyone has a good break. It's Easter in the UK here, and so we've got some holiday. So wishing everyone a happy Easter from the UK, and speak to you soon. Bye-bye.